Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 26 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes. And as always, with me is my fellow practitioner and journeyman in the world of counselling and psychotherapy, Mr. Ken Kelly. How are you, Ken?
I am very well as we go into this autumn season here in the United Kingdom. Things are just beautiful. The leaves are changing. The floor is just a carpet of colour. It's a really positive time of year, and I saw a programme recently called Autumn Watch on television where they referred to it as a time of plenty. And I've never really thought of autumn as a time of plenty, but I guess it is with all the berries and the nuts for the squirrels. So a time of plenty. And again, it comes down to that through the eyes of the beholder, frame of reference. I always thought it of as a time of sparseness. Interesting, but glad to be here.
Yeah. And of course, we're coming up, certainly in the UK, to Bonfire Night, that peculiar British custom and pastime of setting fireworks off and remembering a man not too fondly who tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament.
Yes. Or as we in our family call them, we don't call them fireworks, we call them animal scarers, because our dog really doesn't like it. It becomes really... we even have tablets for the dog. And of course, if you're listening to this in real time, chances Bonfire Night will have passed because we're recording it just before that. But of course, it will go out a few weeks later. Great episode for you as well today. So it's quite seasonal in its start. And we're going to be starting off with something that's pretty important. It's about social media. As a counsellor, as a psychotherapist, how do you manage your social media? How do you manage the messages that you put out? And I'm talking on your private social media platforms as well, keeping in mind that the internet lasts forever and whatever you put out stays out there. We're then going to go on to Theory with Rory, a really interesting one today. We're going back to the Freudian roots, and we're going to be speaking, Rory, I believe, about Oedipus and the Oedipus complex.
Tell me about your mother. Did you like my faux Freudian accent there, Ken? Tell me about your mother. Yeah, I'm going to be looking at Freud. We're going to go and see Uncle Freud. And we're going to be talking about it's kind of ridiculed a little bit, the Oedipus complex. And for those of you who don't know what Oedipus is, I'll paraphrase quite severely. And Freud reflected that young boys may be sexually attracted to their mothers. That's the headline. That's the tabloid headline. But actually, the story of Oedipus, which we find in Greek antiquity, and the lessons we can learn from it are still relevant today. And I'm going to be talking about some general reflections of the history of Oedipus, Freud's interpretation, and how we might see it present in our clients. So
definitely.
I thought it might be an interesting trip down history.
It is, and it really is going back to those roots. And of course, it is a fiercely debated topic. And at the end of the day, it is a theory, but it is one that underpins, I guess, the roots of modern day psychotherapy and counselling. So I'm looking forward to that one. And then we're going to stand up from the couch. Rory, see what I did there? From the we get up from the Freudian couch, and we're going to go into person-centered business. And today I'm going to be looking at paid media. So basically, Facebook advertising, Google pay-per-click advertising, but including in that maybe advertising on paid counselling directories and how you generate leads or traffic to your website using that paid media, and more importantly, how you can measure the effectiveness of that. It's all good and well starting a paid advertising campaign, but if you can't determine what your return on investment is, you don't know whether it's working for you. So we're going to be shining a light in there, and hopefully you won't be marketing in the dark. And then we're going to close off, as many colleges and learning institutions do, with a PD group, a personal development group, speaking about what personal development group means to you. We speak about this periodically. We bring it up from time to time, and it is a recurring topic because it's a recurring topic in our Facebook group. And if you want to join that conversation, come and join over 3,000 like-minded learners, students of psychotherapy, counselling from all around the world. And you can find us by just simply going to Facebook and putting in counselling tutor, and we come up right at the top, knock on the door, we'll let you in. But a start of a 10, as they say. Social media, Rory.
Yes, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Vine,
Yeah.
I think Vine will be gone by the time this broadcast goes out. But the point I'm coming to is that there are so many ways of sharing your wonderful self to the world, whether they want to see it or not.
Yeah.
That we have to be just a bit thoughtful on what we show of ourselves, because boundaries dictate that we kind of take care of ourselves, and also we want our clients to know the intricacies of our lives.
Yeah.
And my view is, I personally wouldn't. I haven't got that much of an interest in life, Ken, for them to look at. But generally speaking, I think that we need to be thoughtful about how much of ourselves we disclose.
Yeah.
Because it's self-protection, and also we're so much more easier to find now. Don't you think, Ken?
Very much so. And you don't need to look far back in history. We've just had the United States elections. Now, just a secret, we're making this just before the US election, so we don't know what the outcome is, but by the time this goes live, the outcome will be known worldwide. But just in the run-up to those elections, the debates and the inquests into the emails are an indication of this, that whatever you put out there lasts forever, and it can be seen even when you think it might not be seen. So when you are maybe on a private Facebook group where you feel you can speak freely, the thing is with a private Facebook group is it is easily accessible by anybody who kind of knocks on the door and gets in there. And it's about the words that you choose to use. And I guess it's about being considerate that whatever you put out on social media will reflect who you are as a person and a counsellor and as a psychotherapist. And again, I know that now when you go for job interviews, part of the recruitment process is to look at your social media, look at the pictures that you post, look at the kind of language that you use in making a decision. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. I think it's quite an invasion of privacy, but I guess it's us that puts that information out in the first place, Rory.
Absolutely. And, you're talking about the American elections, and by the time this goes out, I guess we'll know who the president will be. And you talked about emails and, of course, historic recordings about things that have been said in vans have also come to surface in the media. And one of the things that, I've come to know as a child and adolescent therapist through the years is once something is gone, a picture or even something written on a Facebook feed, you no longer own it. No longer own it. And even if you delete it a few seconds later, I've got software on my computer which I use for legitimate purposes, for screen grabs, capturing images or capturing any image off the screen. We can capture it. Both me and Ken can do that, and we use it in the counselling tutor business for quite legitimate purposes. But even if you publish something and then change your mind 30 seconds later, in that 30 seconds, someone could have captured it and it becomes into the public record. You no longer own it.
Yeah. And I guess if you're studying at the moment, then this is the time to consider this. What does your profile look like in 5 years' time when somebody looks you up online, when they Google your name, when they go through the comments that you've made? And does that profile reflect who you are as a counsellor, as a psychotherapist? And I get it that we're not counsellors and psychotherapists 24 hours a day, but when somebody's looking for us and there's a potential client out there and they're doing a bit of research, they have real easy access to our LinkedIn profiles, our Facebook profiles. Most Facebook profiles are not locked down. There was a time where by standard, it was a standard setting that it was locked and you had to let someone in. Now, it's the standard setting that it is open and anybody can see your profile and what you're saying and who you're friends with, unless you lock it down. So we are, I guess, vulnerable. And so I'll share a little story that caught me quite by surprise. Just the other day, I was asked by a colleague of mine to sign some photographs for a passport. And as I was doing this, I was looking over the accompanying documentation that went with this. And I thought to myself, there was a bit of me that thought, well, I can't really sign these, because I remember when mine were done, I had to go and find a person of good standing within my community. And I actually went to our church minister to get mine done. So I thought, I can't really do this because I'm just Ken. But sure enough, I have a professional qualification. I'm a counsellor. So I'm viewed, I guess, as a person of good standing, or should be a person of good standing. And that's what I'm keeping here. Our name, our the image of who we are. And on social media, everything you say is out there. So it's about, I guess, about thinking what you put out.
Absolutely, Ken. And I've been very thoughtful through the years. I've, doing what I do with the counselling tutor and the YouTube and all the other things I get involved with, I'm very thoughtful about what my public profile is, what my personal profile is. I haven't got anything to hide, I hasten to add. But, I keep my family life very, 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 very much private. And I was sat having lunch in one of our favourite little places over in Saddleworth. I'll give them a plug, the Java Bar in Saddleworth. There we go. And I was sat there having a cup of tea and something to eat. And one of the staff sidled up to me and said, "Are you the guy off YouTube?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "I watch your videos." And I was like, "Thank you very much."
Yeah.
And she was doing some counselling. She was doing a counselling qualification over in Oldham, not very far away to live. And we had a bit of a chat about it. And to be fair to her, she was very discreet and, very respectful of my privacy. And, but she just acknowledged, yes, I've seen you on YouTube. So, yes, it's amazing that how many people can recognise me. It's only happened twice. That's once time in a restaurant and once in a car park. Where someone had seen it, and they were both counselling students. So be very, very thoughtful. And I would dread, I think, if a client said to me, "Oh, I've seen you on Facebook, yes. And yes. I've seen you doing whatever kind of ordinary things I get up to in my family," because they're seeing a side of me that is my private life, and it should remain private. And I've got to say, Ken, I've seen some profiles. Not that I look at the profiles of the people in our Facebook group, but profiles of friends who I post on their walls, and I think, some of their knee-jerk responses, shall I say, to events, they may come to regret.
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and this is really pertinent. It's such an important topic, and I hope that one day you'll look back on remembering listening to this and go, "Wow, I'm grateful of that." I just want to give you an exercise to show you what this can look like for you, because you get to set what your social media looks like, and you're going to be taken by unawares by this, Rory. But if you go online and just go to a Google search and put in Rory Lees Oakes. There you go. I'm encouraging everyone to do that. You will have a look. Just look at the first page of Google, what is returned. And I'm going to share it with you right now. You've got About Counselling Tutor. The next link down is Working with Anxiety Using Person-Centered Approach. The next one down is Counsellor Rory Lees Oakes. The next one down is a LinkedIn profile. And then How to Survive Counselling Training. There's no better time to be a counsellor. The online events where you lectured there, Rory, and it's just all related to who you are and what you do, and it stands you in good light. If I were a client and I looked at your website and then I Googled your name, I'd be going, yep, that's a fit. And I wonder if you're listening to this right now, what you see if you Google your name. Well, you get to start now deciding what that's going to look like in just a few years' time. And keep in mind that the social media platforms are now outranking websites and other things on the internet as they become more and more important, and we are more socially active on them, I guess. Interesting topic to debate.
Absolutely, Ken. And and I think that as we move forward, we may very well see, I know already that complaints have been made by clients against practitioners who've posted stuff about their clients.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's been a couple in the Therapy Today magazine through the years.
Yeah, it's a no-go area. That it is confidentiality, and what we put on social media can be seen by others. It is a break of that confidence. It's just a no-no. So have a think about that. Speak about it with your peers. Take it into your learning institution. Bring it up as a hot, debatable topic, because it's very real and maybe something that we don't always consider. But it's time for a lie down now, Rory. I need a lie down. I want to lie down on your couch while you speak to me about things Freudian.
Yes, well, we're going to visit Uncle Freud. I've got my bow tie on. I've grown a beard. I'm not going to be stereotypical and put a faux German accent on, but we're going to look at a key part of Freud's ideas of child development. We're going to look at Oedipus complex. It finds its history in Greek mythology, and sometimes when it's taught in psychology classes, I think it can be it can be a subject of derision, where people laugh out loud. I don't fancy my mother, this type of thing. But I think it tells us a universal truth, and one which is transmitted sometimes, but not exclusively, in the work we do with clients.
Looking forward to it. So let's head straight into theory with Rory.
Counselling Theory with Rory Lees Oakes.
A few years ago, while having lunch in the college cafeteria, I became aware of a heated discussion on a table adjacent to me. A group of mature students who were studying a humanities pathway had just returned from a psychology class and were hotly debating a piece of theory. He must have been sick. How can a child be sexually attracted to his mother? And I don't get it, were some of the comments emanating from the group. Eventually, one of the students looked over to me and said, "You teach counselling. Can you help us out?" So I joined them and asked what they wished to understand. The reply, Freud's Oedipus complex. Now, for those with a passing interest in psychology, the Oedipus complex, described by Sigmund Freud in his 1899 book, The Interpretation of Dreams, can be both uncomfortable and confusing in equal measure. He proposed that a male child between the ages of 3 and 5 develops a sexual desire for his mother and wishes to replace his father, who the child views as a rival for the mother's affections. Freud named this period of child development the phallic stage and believed it to be an important point in developing sexual identity. So where did Freud get his ideas from, and who was Oedipus? Well, Oedipus was the tragic hero of 3 plays referred to as the Theban plays, written by Greek playwright Sophocles around 400 years BC. The best way to understand the role of Greek theatre is that of an ancient soap opera, which are morality tales featuring themes of fate, betrayal, love and tragedy. The plot revolves around King Laius and Queen Jocasta, who abandons their child Oedipus on a mountain after a prophet told them he would grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. The story tells us that baby Oedipus was found by shepherds and brought up by King Polybius and his queen Merope as their own, never knowing who the real parents were. Years later, he was told by the oracle of Delphi the prophecy of killing his father and marrying his mother, and worried that he might hurt his parents, King Polybius and Queen Merope, he left for the town of Thebes. On his way, he met an old man. They quarrelled and Oedipus killed him. When he arrived at Thebes, he found the king of the city, Laius, had been recently killed, and the city was at the mercy of the Sphinx, a mythical creature with the head of a human and the body of a lion. To defeat it, Oedipus had to answer a riddle given to him by the Sphinx. He answered the question correctly, defeated it, winning the throne of the dead king and the hand in marriage of the king's widow, unknown to him, his mother, Jocasta. Years later, Oedipus searched to find who had killed Laius and discovered that he himself was responsible. Jocasta, upon realising she had married both her own son and her husband's murderer, hanged herself. Oedipus then seized 2 pins from her dress and blinded himself with them. So what's the moral of this grisly story? Well, some would interpret it as you cannot escape fate. The students quietly listened to the story before one asked, yes, but how does this translate to Freud's theory? So I asked them, how many of them had children who said things like, I'm going to marry mummy when I grow up, or had competed for affection by getting into the parental bed and sleeping between mum and dad, effectively pushing the father out? Quite a few replied that this was happening to them and they were trying to manage it. I went on to reflect that the fate in question is the subconscious bonding between the child and his mother. We know this bond is the first steps to socialisation and building relational bonds. As a baby, we are cared for and nurtured. We feel at some subconscious level love, acceptance and care, and that's placed into our psyche. So do men marry their mothers? Well, not quite, but I do wonder if subconsciously we choose aspects in our partners which replicate those early bonds of attachment with our primary caregivers, who are usually, but not exclusively, our mother. When seeking a partner, are we driven by the subconscious fate of attachment, that at some level, when we fall in love, we are trying to replicate those feelings of safety, acceptance and love we had as a small child? When I left the students, the nature of their conversation had changed, with some of the female learners reflecting they felt they mothered their partners, or their partners expected to be mothered by them. One thing that had changed over the time I'd spent with them, that the theory was no longer an abstract piece of information, but one that could be observed in areas of their lives. A few final points. Freud lived in less enlightened times where gender roles were rigidly enforced. In a modern society, mother figures are not always female, father figures are not always male, and yes, according to Carl Jung, a collaborator of Sigmund Freud, women have the same process, a theory Jung drew from another Greek play by Sophocles, Electra, but that's a story for another day.
Thank you very much for that, Rory. As always, really, really interesting, very informative. And it's really interesting to me that all of those years back, the Greeks really had quite an understanding of the human condition, didn't they?
Yes, and people have nicked it mercilessly through the years, yeah. Shakespeare and a few other people. But yeah, the Greeks did really have an idea of morality tales. And I'll let you into a little secret. When they're writing scripts for soap operas like Coronation Street, we have in the UK Coronation Street, longest running soap opera in the world apparently. The writers put in techniques, they call it Greeking it up.
Yeah.
And what they do is they little morality tales about what happens when someone does something. So that's a little bit of a secret there, Greeking it up. But are you going to be Greeking it up in person-centered business? Are you going to be telling us morality tales? Or are you going to be delivering some fiscal solidarity, Ken?
Yeah, I guess fiscal solidarity I can hardly pronounce, but we're going to head in that direction. And sadly, we kind of come to the end of person-centered business today. We started off looking at just the nature of business for counsellors and psychotherapists and how that might look if you one day decide to go into private practice. We've covered a whole load of different areas of the person-centered business through to defining your offer, looking at what you might offer in your practice, having your business cards made, brochures, and of course, the last 2 weeks we've looked at websites. But we need traffic on a website for somebody to contact us, and there's ways of paying. It's called paid media to get that traffic. And we're going to look at various paid medias. We're going to look at Facebook advertising. We're going to look at Google pay-per-click ads, and of course, we're going to look at paid-for counselling directories. So let's get straight into that. Person-centered business.
Person-centered business with Kenneth Kelly.
In this final episode of Person-Centered Business, we look at how you can pay to get traffic to your website or pay to get inquiries from people that are maybe looking to engage with your counselling or psychotherapy service. And there's definitely some pitfalls there. So we're going to be looking at what is called paid media. When you're paying for traffic or to get an inquiry, it is called paid media. We're going to be looking at what some of the pitfalls are and what you can watch out for. And we're going to be looking at how to work out what your ROI is, or that's known as your return on investment, to make sure that it's worthwhile and that you're not just throwing money down a big dark pit. So, paid media, what is it? Anything that you pay for that is going to bring you some inquiries in that happens online. So this would not be your brochures, this would not be your business card, this would not be maybe a information poster that you might put up in a public place. This is electronic and it is online. So an example of paid media might be that you may choose to list in a counselling directory. Now, here in the UK, there are a number of counselling directories, and some of them are private companies that offer this service, and you pay for it. You go in and you set up your directory listing, and you pay your fee usually for the year, and they will explain who you are. They will show your advert in a geographically targeted area. Another example of paid media might be that you may choose to take out a Google pay-per-click advert. And if you're wondering what that is, if you do a search on Google and you put in Counsellor, what you will notice is right at the top of the page, you're probably going to have 3 to 4 listings of people who are paying to be there. And you can see this if you look really carefully, because they kind of make it difficult to see. You'll see it's got the word AD next to it, meaning ad. And these are paid for ads where people will pay a fee and link that to a certain keyword. The keyword might be Counsellor. And when that keyword is triggered, it will show that ad word. And if somebody clicks on that ad word, then you pay a fee for that. And that's why it is called pay per click or PPC advertising through Google. And another example of paid media, paid advertising online might be Facebook advertising, where you may choose to target a segment of people or a certain type of person, depending on what they have in their profile, and place an advert in front of them. So Google pay-per-click advertising is probably a little more targeted than, say, Facebook, because on Facebook people are not searching for something. It's used more as a social platform. People are maybe having a chat with their friends, and I feel it might be quite invasive to put an advert up that suggests counselling. You don't know who may be accessing that person's social media profile, so it may, for me, doesn't feel like a good fit. It may be that I know that I sometimes see my wife's social media platform, and if she was maybe looking for counselling and I saw an advert on her social media on her Facebook page for counselling, that would give me an indication that she might have been looking for that and searching for that. So I would be cautious of using Facebook for advertising. But Google pay-per-click is certainly somebody puts in a keyword and the services within that area come up. So top tips when listing. And this is when listing is, what do you write if you are taking out a listing directory? What are you going to write in there? If you're writing an advert for Google pay-per-click advertising, what do you write within that advert? And usually when we're looking at a listing directory, or we're looking at a pay-per-click advert and paid media, you're limited by the amount of words that you can put in. I guess it's the same as a classified advert in a newspaper. You've only got a certain amount of words that you can use. You've got a headline at the top and a description. And on this, I'd like to refer you to episode 21 of the Counselling Tutor podcast, where I covered this in depth. It's called an elevator pitch. And if you go across all the person-centered business episodes that we've done, you'll notice that they kind of build one on top of the other, and they kind of little bits of one episode will be useful for another one. So I would refer you to episode 21 if you want to have a look at what the elevator pitch is. And it's basically where you define what it is that you offer in the minimum amount of words, making that highly effective, highly targeted to the person who might be looking for your service. The next thing that is really important when you're looking at paid media is geographical targeting. This is so important. It's so easy to maybe be tempted into going and trying to set up a Google pay-per-click AdWords campaign. Maybe Google are saying, hey, start an AdWords campaign and we'll give you £75 or $75 free of charge and you can run your campaign. And they take you through a process of setting that up. What do you want to say? What are the keywords that you want to trigger your ad? Counsellor, psychotherapist, and you'd go through that whole stage. But be really, really careful that you set your geographic targeting, because it's no good for me. I work in Warrington. I offer counselling services in Warrington. If somebody in Manchester, which is now around about 20 minutes drive from me, was looking for a counsellor and my ad came up and they clicked on that, well, I'd be paying for that. But it's unlikely that they would get in their car and drive for 20 minutes, unless they had a very specific reason to do so, to come and see me, because there are counsellors providing a very similar service within the area. So you want to be geographically targeting where your advert shows up. And for myself, if I were to do Google pay-per-click AdWords, I would only target it within the town that I live, so that if somebody within Warrington here in the United Kingdom searched counsellor, that my ad would pop up. But if somebody in Manchester typed it, it wouldn't pop up because it is not relevant to that person. So geographic targeting is definitely a consideration. The next thing we need to look at, specifically if you're looking at a listing in a directory or a Google pay-per-click advert, is the effectiveness of the landing page on your website. So what is a landing page? Well, we covered websites in depth in episode 24, so you can go and have a listen to that. The effectiveness of a landing page, well, when they click on your ad, what page on your website does it take them to? And you can set which page it takes them to, including on the counselling listing directories. You can say when they click to find out more information, take them to this page on my website. And we need to really be looking at what we're putting on there. And if you go over episode 24, I cover some of the main topics in terms of having your contact details available. Once again, having your elevator pitch, which is covered in episode 21, right at the top, so that you are defining your offer and defining where you are geographically. So basically saying who you can help, who you can't help, and right at the top of your page. So your landing page needs to be really effective. Because if it's confusing, if it's a mismatch to the advert or the listing that you have, chances are they're just going to click the back arrow and go to the next person on the list, and you've paid for that click if you're using Google pay-per-click advertising, and you're not going to get any inquiries from that. And if it's in the listing, you're just not going to get an inquiry. So that's going to affect your ROI, which is our next topic, which is your return on investment. If you're paying to get traffic, you're paying to have people visit your website, which a listing directory is, which Google pay-per-click advertising is, which Facebook advertising is, you need to know whether it is effective or not. And it's called ROI. It is the return on your investment. So if you pay £10 or $10 on advertising, how much is generated in terms of revenue within your counselling practice from that money that you pay out? And the way that you are able to work that out, it can be quite tricky. You can use statistics and things like Google Analytics. Analytics will show you who's coming in and how effective that traffic is. But it is quite complicated, it's quite geeky, and it may be that you don't really want to be going down coding on websites and looking at all those kind of statistics, and I get that. So another way, which is, I guess, rather simple, is to ask people. So if somebody's getting in contact with you and they come and they engage maybe in that first session, whether it be a free session or a paid session, it's worth saying, how did you find me? And if they say, I found you on the internet, try and be a little bit more specific and say, oh, that's interesting. Was that from a directory listing, or was that from a Google? If it's from Google, and it's likely that it may be from a Google pay-per-click advert if you're using them. And of course, if it's from the listing directory, then you will know that client, the return on investment for the listing is worthwhile because you're getting clients from that. So there's a basic overview of paid media. You know, this is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to person-centered marketing, running a business as a counsellor or a psychotherapist. There is so much to know and learn. And I think that we go into college, we go into university, we go into our learning institutions, and we learn how to become counsellors, but we're not always given the tools to be able to create a business around our newly founded skills. And I really do hope that person-centered business has been of use and of interest to you. And if you have any questions, or if you want any more information on anything I've covered in any of the episodes in person-centered business, just drop me an email, and you can drop me an email at ken@counsellingtutor.com. And as always, I just hope that has been useful to you.
I always find your handle on internet business and business in general so useful. You've been so helpful in my developing my private practice. I'm really grateful for that. But you know, the key message is there are so many people out there, aren't there, trying to get hold of your money and promising you the earth and saying, oh, if you advertise with us and we'll get you so many clients. But evidencing where your money's spent and how effective it is, as you say, is so important. And sure. You know, you've talked about finishing this segment. And what I would say, Ken, is that people who listen to this, if your students are moving in to the ending of your qualifications and thinking about what the next step is, you cannot escape that if you set a business up, you have to have a business mind. You can't get around it. You can't get around it. And it doesn't mean that you're mercenary or, you know, the unacceptable face of capitalism. It means that you develop as Ken has so, you know, eloquently described as a person-centered business. You're offering a good quality service for a good outcome, and also to pay your bills, which is, you know, what we have to do. Always have to do.
Indeed. I know I've got mine to pay, Rory, and I really hope that little segment that we ran for those last few weeks has been of use to you guys. But now, a topic, I guess, that we bring up every now and again, it's PD groups.
Yes, PD groups. Perennially, we get asked as when we were tutors, what are they for and what are they about? And I guess the answer to that is it's sometimes they're called PD groups, but I know in psychotherapy circles they're called process groups. And they're really, really useful they're a safety valve because they're usually held at the end of the training. So the idea is, and this is a bit of an insight into training, is there's the theory, then you develop your practice. You learn how to put theory to practice. Then you develop that in skills. And then if there's anything that comes up, you have the safety valve of being able to kind of release it or vent it in PD. And personal development is about thinking about the changes that you're going through and finding the courage, I think, to explore them and get a contrary view. And they are, by necessity, very challenging environments, Ken.
They can be very much so. They can be really enriching environments as well. It's tricky because every PD group is going to be different. Every group that I've belonged to or been part of has been different. They have their own personality, as it might be. And that personality can well change. I've been in PD groups where maybe somebody has entered the group, somebody new has joined in, or maybe somebody has left the group, and it changes the nature of the group. They tend to take on a momentum of their own. But there's such rich learning there. Even in a challenging group, there is such rich learning. It may well be, and I'm just going to use an example here, maybe you have a struggle with confrontation. Maybe that brings stuff up for you. Within a PD group, from time to time, you're likely to find confrontation of some kind. And it's about when you see that happening, it doesn't necessarily have to be directed at you. It might be confrontation between, or what you perceive as confrontation between two other members of the group. It's a great opportunity when that comes up to say, okay, I'm now feeling really uncomfortable. What is that feeling? Where does it sit? What's that about? What's coming up in me? Why is this coming up in me? And to sit in a safe environment, as you said, Rory, because it is such a safe place to be, and experience those emotions, maybe fears, maybe anxieties that maybe in day-to-day life we might pull away from or run away from. So a PD group is an opportunity to feel and let it wash over you, and it's maybe even overwhelm you because you're in a safe place. You can feel it there.
Absolutely, Ken. And as you rightly say, they should be affirming places. So, I started off by saying they're challenging by default. Well, they are, because you're in a environment where you're surrounded by your peers. Usually you have a tutor, although there has been self-facilitated PD groups, and they have a different dynamic completely where the tutor's not present. And they should be affirming. And the reason that we have them, I believe, is because as practitioners, we need to understand and kind of work with our anxieties and fears about our own process.
Oh, yeah.
And we don't get the luxury of doing that in the therapy room, because if we're stuck in our own process when working with a client, then we're not in the client's frame of reference. We're stuck in our own process. And that is why personal therapy, PD, is just so important, so that if something comes up, and I'm big on transference and counter-transference, parallel process, you can pick those up in other podcasts, those terms. If you get stuck in those and you don't know why it's happening, then you're in a bit of a sticky spot. You're in a bit of a difficult position.
Yeah.
So that's what PD groups are for. And I can remember being in my PD group and saying, I have no idea what this is about. We're all sat in silence, and I missed the first one. So I was off that week, and I came in and I said, I have no idea. And my tutor said to me, well, what does silence mean to you? And I sat there kind of going, I don't like this. Yeah. I don't like this at all. And I realised, of course, that maybe I was filling the silences because I wanted people to see me and be present. And I took away that and wondered why I had to do that. So even on that second uncomfortable session, food for thought, Ken.
Oh, very, very, very much so. And there can be times where you can practice being person-centered, I guess, if you're studying the person-centered approach, in that if somebody else is talking within the group, that you can really empathically listen to them, as opposed to think of what you're going to say next. You get that the opportunity to sit and practice your way of being, I guess it is, of really being there as other people are talking, really empathically listening, because those are the skills that you're going to be using in front of your clients, where you're going to be really hearing them. So really hear the people in your PD group, even when their opinions, their thoughts differ from yours, and they can differ considerably. How does that make you feel? What comes up for you? Because what happens when you're with a client and their opinions differ for you from yours? So much there. And the one thing that I wanted to put in here, which for me is really important, is you get the opportunity to practice courage, and we are encouraged to aim to be courageous by the BACP in a new ethical framework, and to say something if something is not right. To call it out, to point it out, maybe to a colleague, to an agency you might be working in. And that's not easy to do. But it is likely that as you sit in your PD group, that from time to time stuff will come up with that you strongly disagree with or you don't think was right. Well, you get the opportunity in that PD group, in that safe environment, to exercise courage and to voice that. And it might feel scary and you might find yourself shaking. It could even bring emotional tears to your eyes, but you're in a safe place, and it's a great it's a muscle, courage muscle. It's a great muscle to exercise, that courage muscle, in the safety of the PD group.
It is, Ken. And also I think that, in general, we're taught to listen to respond, not to listen to understand.
Oh, yes.
I think that's a great point. How often have you spoken to someone and they've responded as opposed to understanding where you're coming from? Yeah. And PD groups can be a great place for developing that way of being, that skill of not just listening to the story, but the music, the words behind it. And, I've seen lots of people's perceptions altered in PD groups, where maybe a voice has said, I just don't feel worthy enough to do this work. And voices around have said, you are.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
And that's led to an incredible collaborative effort where all the voices support this person and help them explore where that's come from. They can be very powerful, but, some of them, depending on the constitution of the group, can sometimes feel, sadly, a bit kind of tough.
Yeah,
tough.
Definitely, they are tough, and it is idiosyncratic in that it changes depending on where everybody is at. In that one day you may find yourself in a very light PD group where the topics are light, and you may even find yourself rolling with laughter, wiping the tears from your eyes as you slap your thighs and go, wow, I can't breathe anymore, that is so funny. And then you may have another session where you are moved, touched, disturbed. There's such a variation of what can be experienced in a PD group. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. And I know that Roger's, towards the end of his career, that was a great area of focus for him. He was calling them not PD groups then. I think they were encounter groups that he was calling them, but offering the same kind of facilitative conditions, I guess, within the groups, and doing absolutely incredible work. They're a very special place to be, and if you are finding it challenging, say so. If you feel that there's something not working within your PD group, you exercise that courage muscle. You have got the voice to say it. Have the courage to say it.
And you deserve to say it.
Yeah.
You deserve to say it.
Definitely.
And as I always said, I quoted the late Mayor Angelou, without courage, you cannot practice any other condition effectively.
Yeah.
You can't be loving, you can't be kind, you can't be honest, unless you have courage.
100%.
So there we go. And I think maybe it's time to have the courage to finish the podcast.
I think it is. And what a podcast today has been. So we kicked off discussing social media, the importance of your profile as you are a counsellor, psychotherapist. What are you showing to the world? I loved listening and learning about the Oedipus complex. Thank you very, very much for that, Rory. We had our final person-centered business slot where we spoke about paid media and how you can measure your return on investment to make sure you're getting bang for your buck. And of course, we closed off speaking about personal development groups. It's been fantastic, and I look forward to our next episode.
I do. And hey, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.